Good afternoon and welcome to our Genially Talks. I would like to present our wonderful speaker, Christy Oliva, Learning Project Manager at Amazon and a wonderful Genially Corporate Ambassador. So welcome, Genially. Welcome, Christy, to our Genially.
You can call me Genially. I think that's a fun name.
Actually, she will present an amazing and interesting section about how to create dynamic assessments with Genially. So, all yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello. As she said, my name is Christy Oliva. And first, I want to thank the Genially team for allowing me to be part of this event. I'm so excited. It's such a good opportunity to speak to all of you and be on this platform to share my knowledge with you. So is my screen able to be shown, Christia?
Wonderful. I will do it right now. Amazing.
Perfect. All right. So as she said, I'm going to be talking today about how to create high quality dynamic assessments using Genially. But a little bit about me, first of all. I am a former teacher of 15 years, and now, as she mentioned, I am a Genially ambassador. I am an IDLE Courses Academy mentor. I have a podcast called Leaving the Classroom, and I'm program manager for assessment strategy at Amazon. I design assessments to use as a training toll gate, ensuring our customer service associates are ready to begin taking customer calls. And I'm here today to talk to you about how to create high quality dynamic assessments using Genially. So, did you know that the largest drop in learning retention happens right after learning? Right after you learn. Without reviewing what you have just learned, you are going to forget it. So have you ever attended a class or a workshop only to forget a large amount of the content only hours later? I know I have. One way to combat this phenomenon, called Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve, is with high quality assessments. So I'm not sure, what does our interaction look like on here, Christia? Can people interact with us?
Yeah, they're able to interact. So I'm here checking the LinkedIn.
Okay.
So any
I just don't know if they're able to give like thumbs up or anything like that, but I'm still going to ask for it. So you can just give me a silent one if you can. But if you can give me any kind of indication, that would be great as well. Wonderful. But I just want you to think. What? Go ahead.
I will share all the questions and comments from our audience.
Okay. Perfect. So I want you to think to yourself, have you ever taken an assessment with one or more select all that apply questions? Just think to yourself. I know I see them all the time. We'll talk more about those. Tell me if you have ever taken an assessment with one or more obvious distractors. So the distractor is the incorrect answer on an assessment. I call these Mickey Mouse distractors, these obvious distractors, because unless you work for Disney, it is an obvious distractor if you have Mickey Mouse as one of the answer options. And it also deems that question ineffective. So low quality assessment questions with Mickey Mouse distractors, too many answer choices, or confusing phrasing don't work. But they can also frustrate learners and contribute to a poor learning experience. High quality assessment questions can help you find gaps. Here, I think I'm behind on my, nope, I'm not. High quality assessments, on the other hand, can help you find gaps in your course content and help you improve the way the content is delivered. So today we're going to start with what assessments are and what they are not. So I think these slides were having to do with my Mickey Mouse distractors. And so I do have an example here of what a Mickey Mouse distractor would look like. So here's a question. Who gathered the data that helped reveal the structure of DNA? I know nothing about DNA, but I already know that Snoopy is not the correct answer. So that is a Mickey Mouse distractor. It immediately makes this a true-false question or a 50-50 question because I don't know the answer, and so it's got to be one of those other two. But I know for sure it's not Snoopy. Okay? And so that just lowers the effectuality of our questions. Okay? So let's talk about what assessments are and what they are not. Assessments can help us bridge the gap here between the content and the questions and help our learners succeed. So assessments are not written to, what they are and what they are not. Assessments are written to align with learning objectives, not the content. We are not talking about how to write quality learning objectives today, but in order to have an effective assessment question, your learning objective needs to be clear and measurable with a strong verb. Okay? So write them to the learning objectives, not the content. And many people make this mistake where they'll write their assessment questions by looking at the content. They wrote the content first, but really our objective is to write the assessment questions first so that we know what we are going to be working towards. Think with the end in mind. Assessments are based on a job task analysis and should mirror on-the-job tasks. If an assessment does not do a good job of mimicking what the learner needs to do in real life, it's not effective. All right, and assessments are given as much importance and feedback as the content. Now, I know many companies have content review processes and policies, how many people need to be looking through the content, but assessments are often written quickly as an afterthought and get minimal feedback, while the course content has been through several rounds of feedback. The assessment should be written before the content, as I mentioned before, and be approved before the content is ever written. So, what makes a good multiple choice assessment question? Well, from the research I've done on assessment best practices, here are my top 5 tips, and then we'll get into how to implement these using Genially. So the first one is to assess one learning objective per question. So before I said with your learning objectives, one verb, one question, that's how to assess them. If you are assessing more than one learning objective, that question is ineffective because you don't know which part they got wrong. You need to have answer choices that are similar in length and format, and I do have some examples of that later on. Write one correct answer and 2 distractors. So this means no select all that apply questions. Those are some of the top missed questions and most frustrating factors for learners. But why one correct answer and only 2 distractors? From my research, I've just found that the law of diminishing returns applies here. And if you have too many distractors, they just become poorer and poorer quality, and you will get those Mickey Mouse distractors. You need to have realistic distractors. So we talked about this before with no Mickey Mouse distractors. Snoopy could not have been involved in the DNA process. So they need to be realistic and something that a learner who did not take your course content would most probably choose. So you saw on the Snoopy, the DNA question, the Snoopy one was obvious, but the other 2 were not that obvious. I don't know which one is correct because I didn't take that content. I didn't study that. So I would get it incorrect, most likely. But someone who took the content would get it correct easily because they would know that name. And the last tip I have for you for quality assessment questions is to limit true-false questions. Why? Simply because they're easier. There are a 50-50 chance of getting it correct. Okay, so now let's get to where Genially enters into the mix. How can you use Genially to take your high-quality questions and make them into a dynamic assessment? Well, one of the most fun features of Genially is the ability to use the interactive elements panel to branch your course, presentation, or assessment to make it more dynamic and actually respond to how the learner answers a question or responds to a task. So I am seeing questions. Seth is asking, is that 2 distractors at most per assessment or per question? That's per question. So every question you write, you'll have 1 correct answer, 1, not a select all that apply, and then 2 distractors for that correct answer. Good question. I don't know if there's been no other questions, so we're good there. Okay, so now let's take a look at how to implement this in Genially using the interactive elements that are so fun to use. Okay, so I built Darn, the color changed on the back of this, but that's okay. The Genially kitchen I have here. Somehow my text turned to blue and white, so the contrast is not as good as I normally would have had. So let's pretend you took a course on how to build the perfect sandwich. Now, since this presentation is about assessments, I'm not going to show you the coursework that went along with this. We're going to talk about how would you assess this. And so I'm going to give you some examples of some high quality questions with good distractors. And I'm also going to show you how I would turn this into a on-the-job, real-life assessment. So there's 2 assessments for this task. Okay, so I don't know if this would be at a restaurant, but really I just looked up what's the best way to make a sandwich and found the ways that we would do that. Okay, and so this first assessment is going to be my multiple choice assessment to show how my knowledge of how to build the perfect sandwich. It's so strange that the colors are a little bit different on this. So let's go back here a second. I'm going to go to my editor real quick because it's not showing up in the colors I chose. And I don't know how that happened. I apologize.
No worries, Christy, this happens.
It just means some of the text is not showing. I know this text is hard to read, but here I can make it a different color real quick. We'll just show you how easy it is to do in Genially.
It's quite great. You're like showing your Genially how you create this presentation from the editor.
So, and I can't find the button I included on here. There should be an info button to help the learner look up what those so let's go to my second assessment real quick because I know that's in there. We'll look at the multiple choice in a moment. So the Genially kitchen. So you just learned how to make the perfect sandwich, and now I'm asking you to actually implement that. And so it's asking you to choose the first ingredient to get started, but if you need help, I'm providing help. Why do I provide help on assessments? Well, unless this is really high stakes and it's a life or death situation where they do have to memorize all this content, I like to have options for the learner to go back and revisit the content so that they can research it and look again. Also, the research that I've done shows that when a learner goes and researches and looks up that answer again, even after they've already seen the content, they are that much more likely to remember the content because they had to go back and search for it again. So they are more likely to remember. So with this info button I have here in Genially, you have the option to turn it into basically a pop-up window. So anytime I want my learner to just be able to revisit this content, they can pull up this window. And so I have the steps for the perfect sandwich in there. And anytime during this activity, they are able to go back and look at what the perfect sandwich should look like. So let's take a look at this activity. And you'll see here, I've got all these slides built out down here of all the different combinations, which this is a prototype, so I don't have every single combination, but I do have an incorrect answer and a correct answer built out to show you what this would look like so that the learner gets meaningful feedback as they go. But like I said, every single slide has that info button built in as well so that they can revisit that and double check, am I on the right track with this? But let's have a look. If I were the user and I'm playing this game or interaction, whatever you would call it, we choose our first ingredient. And as you can see, just every slide I've included the ingredients, and now the learner can go through and decide when they've done their sandwich. So if I go back and click on the info button and find out, okay, well, it says that a slick of mayo or butter on both sides of bread will flavor each bite. So I'm going to want to start with my mayo. Again, I can check on this as a learner as many times as I want, and it's reinforcing my retention of this knowledge. So I'm okay with that. And this is the more on-the-job, realistic activity or assessment, and we'll look at the multiple choice assessment that matches up with my presentation a little bit later since it doesn't have that info button. Okay, and so then I don't don't know what to do next. I forgot, or I didn't pay attention to the content. So I'm going to go back and look here. It's talking about where to put the meats and cheeses, talking about where to put the textures. So I'm just going to give it a try. And so I'm going to put the tomatoes next because I just didn't read. I didn't pay attention. I just want to get through this. All right, there's my sandwich. Oh, my sandwich is incomplete. I did not do that correctly, so I have to try again. So then it'll take me back to the front and I get to do it all over again until I master that one. So that's one way to include a dynamic assessment in Genially. And so let me show you a little bit more on the back end of what that looks like, because I think that's important. So each of these items, these are just images I found on Adobe. Okay, so these are not Genially images. These are not my images. You can upload any kind of image you want into Genially and make it an interactive element. And that's one of the things I love the most about Genially. And so I've decided that when you click on this bread, it takes you to this certain page, which I've called bread only, right? So the bread only page is where that one will take us. And so each of these, if I had more than a prototype built out, would take you to a certain page, okay? And one of the things that I found with Genially, sorry, let's go to this page next. So now that I have my bread, again, I deleted that one. You decide what to do here, but then each of these, you can see here when I click on this, made that one interactive as well. So I just uploaded each of my pieces of the sandwich and made sure that it went to a certain page that would give that learner feedback. So it's going to apply that ingredient to the sandwich. Whether or not that's correct or not, they can always double check by clicking on the button here. So to give anything interactivity, let's find one that doesn't have any interactive elements right now. So let's say this bowl. Like right now, this is not an interactive element. I chose not to make that an interactive element, or sorry, the plate. I guess it looks like a bowl. But if I click on Add Interactivity, I can make it pop up with a tooltip, the window that I showed you for my info button, the go to the page, which is where the dynamic assessment really comes into play, because whatever they choose, you can decide to give them specific feedback. And I'll show you a little bit more about that when we go to my multiple choice assessment. Then the link, I have, I can share this out with you all at the end, because at the end, I have made an interactive element with a link to show you how you would track the learner in an LMS, because that's important, right? We want to know what they're clicking on and how to track that information so that that can give us data for our uses as a company. And so there is a way to do that. And so on our last slide here, I think so when you finally do build this, the sandwich, you come to this slide, but I included getting data from your Genially creation. So there is a way to get data. I can track how many times they've clicked on each of these buttons. And so what that's going to tell me is, let's say they made a soggy sandwich. So this is a more specific piece of feedback I can give them. Well, how many people have clicked on this specific button? I can track that. And so I can find out how many people are building a soggy sandwich. Now that sounds silly right now, but let's apply that to a business principle, and you can find out how many people have a common misconception about the information that we're giving them. And what does that give us? Information about gaps in our content, information about gaps in our assessment questions. But we really need to look at the whole picture and say, why are so many people choosing that specific incorrect option? So the correct option gives us a lot of data, but so does specific incorrect options. Samantha, I will be making this available to you. Yes. Although keep in mind, it is a prototype. So all the sandwich creation possibilities are not built out, because that would have taken me quite some time. Because after I built out all the ingredients, I'm like, oh gosh, I think I did a lot of ingredients. Oh gosh. Okay. So anyways, you can find out when I share this out. I have linked to the Genially site that shows you exactly how to track that data, which gives you some really good information. Okay, so what else did I want to show you about this? I showed you that there was specific feedback to give. I think we can go ahead and go to my multiple choice assessment questions. Well, let me show you what it looks like though when they get it correct. Let's see if I remember what the correct combination is. And I had some people test this out and they were like, I guess I didn't know how to build a perfect sandwich. And I learned a little bit about this too. I did not know that the condiments act as a sogginess barrier between the bread and the ingredients. I also did not know, because I have been putting tomatoes on first, and I guess it's obvious that that would make the bread soggy, but it's not the best choice. So what did it say to do? It said to put the meat on first. So I think this is how I did it. Then I don't know what I'm doing here. Oh, dang it. I didn't do the right sandwich. So you see, you can turn these dynamic, I don't know if I would call this a game, but these dynamic assessments can turn into turning a frustration level of a learner into, oh, let me try that again. I really want to see what that turned out to be. I know, Robin, it's true. Can I pass my own assessment? Doesn't look like it. Oh gosh. Do you use Genially as a pre-assessment to assess learner skills so as to point them to the right level of course? That's a great thing to point out there, Robin, because yes, you could put that pre-assessment at the top, and based on which answers they chose, you can route them to certain parts of the course. Let's say they got all of the questions correct on one portion. Why would they sit through that content? Skip over that content for them, right? Route them to a different portion of that content, allow them to skip. How can you track the answers? Juliana asks. Once again, here, I can share the link in the chat. It came from the Genially website, so this is not my own. But I just searched. How can you track learner data? Maybe I don't have access to actually put anything in the chat.
Yeah, actually, you can send it to me, and I will, in the private chat, I can share to our audience so they can start playing with their Genially, and we can show.
Yeah,
that will be amazing.
You can start playing in there. I love that. If you're trying to build an assessment tool in order to give a suggestion of options according to the answers, which will vary because there were not going to be right or wrong answers. Mainly the suggested pathway will come from those answers. It's more like an assessment tool and a starting point. That's definitely possible. Yes, Liliana. I love how you guys are thinking, because now that you see that routing possibility, the options are endless. So then what I did is I created this one from scratch, but then I was like, let's see what Genially has to offer. And I found a template. There are at least 3 branching scenario templates within Genially. So I took one and adapted it, but then I know what happened is I built it in a separate Genially, and then I copied it over. So you know what? Let me, I can get it from my other presentation so that it's not tripping me up so much. Sorry about this, but now you're just seeing my thought process here. So I built them all separately, my presentation and the 2 quizzes. And then when I copied it over, that's weird that it changed colors. That's feedback for Genially.
Received.
I love this.
I'm here.
Okay. So this is the multiple choice one that I built out. And so you can see I just used similar imagery and all that. But, and I think I actually just simply forgot to put the info button in. But the plan was to also offer that information button to them in this assessment as well. But I can see the reason why maybe this one you wouldn't want to, because you want them to memorize it first. And again, the order that you give them these assessments, I would probably give them the multiple choice assessment first. But let me show you something else before I show you these questions. this came with this presentation, this decision-making scheme. And what I love about this, so this came with this template. If you go to your Genially account and you choose branching scenario number 3, I think is what it's called, it gives you this. And so it gives you suggestions on, okay, if they get it correct, let's take them on this path. If it's, they call this neutral decision, no impact. So like maybe it's the incorrect answer, but it's like that question maybe doesn't matter as much, or that answer choice was the next closest one to the correct answer. That's for you to decide. Takes them on a different path. And then the incorrect answer can take them on a completely different path altogether. And so what I love about this is you can really tailor the learning to that learner. So let's say they keep getting questions incorrect. You can reword questions. You can give them simpler questions. This makes me think of, our kids in school, or at least in the United States here, we have standardized tests. And at the beginning of the school year, they are given an assessment that does this exact thing. If they keep getting hard answers correct, it gives them harder and harder answers, because then it's showing that they are able to master those. But if they keep getting a question incorrect, or a simpler question incorrect, it's going to simplify the questions. And what's that's doing is finding their level. So this is another way that if you really want to build that out like that, you could build out a Genially that does just that, which is so exciting. Okay, so this is part of that Genially template. So you can find that in that branching scenario number 3. So I started to build out my prototype for how to use just multiple choice assessment questions to move to get that same effect. So to respond to the learner, basically. So based on what we saw, which of the following should go on the sandwich first to prevent sogginess? So let's first take a look at, based on the assessment guidelines I gave you for what a good question and good distractors are, let's look at those real quick and make sure that we're following that. So which of the following is a very common way and a really good way to start assessment questions? And the way you word your question, the learner should be immediately trying to answer that in your head. Okay, so sometimes you can go wrong with these which of the following questions. It can go the wrong way, and it can make them where it's like it's too broad and they have to read the answer choices to know the answer. But if a learner went through your content and they're reading this assessment question, they should be coming up with an answer in their head right away. Okay. Sorry, I just had a brain fog moment here. Let's look at the answer choices. So the answer choices, remember we talked about that they should be realistic. So I listed out the actual ingredients that are on the table. I didn't put anything that I didn't put on the table, and I did not put anything that would be unrealistic for preventing sogginess. I tried to choose things like I didn't put tomato on there because to me that seems obvious that it wouldn't prevent sogginess. In fact, it may cause sogginess. So I put the correct answer and then my 2 distractors. And I always put the correct answer first, just for our purposes, so you know which one is which. And you see how they're similar in length. They each list 2 ingredients. So that's where those high quality assessment questions come in. If I have one answer that's really long, and I don't know if you're a good test taker like me, but they even teach this in SAT prep, that always look at the longest answer choice first. It's usually the correct one. So we want to avoid that in our assessment questions. We don't want to put one that's way longer and 2 that are really short, because it's pointing out to the learner, this one's correct, this one's correct. And that's an ineffective question. Are they getting it correct because they knew the content or because they were really good at taking assessments? We don't know. Sorry, I'm looking at the comments now. Where most of your users ended up and which wrong slides they landed on. Yes, Samantha, exactly. Because you can track those clicks, you really get to see where are they landing each time, and you can either tailor your content to that, tailor your assessment to that, or build a facility, an ILT that like clears that up, or maybe you need to just clear something up in the content. Creating these interactive choices causes the instructor to think critically about the assessment goal. Yes, Teresa. We should be thinking about the assessment before we even do the content. Okay, and that's exactly what I did here. I did not build any content on how to build a perfect sandwich. I just found the steps to building a perfect sandwich, and I knew I wanted to assess that, and so I built the assessment first. Okay, then we can build the course and make sure that the course teaches them to be successful in this assessment. But if we don't know how we're going to assess them, the content is null. And typically, if you don't build the assessment first, you will end up with a lot of extraneous content that confuses the learner and causes content overload or cognitive overload. Okay. All right, so we talked about how the question, the learner should be trying to answer it in their head immediately. We don't want long answer choices. We want them to be simple. And so when a learner who's gone through my course reads this question, they should immediately be thinking of an ingredient that they know applies to that answer. So then what I did here is each of these answer choices that they choose, I use that interactive element to go to a certain page. So the correct answer goes to a different page than each of the incorrect answers. And I used the routing map at the end of the template as my guide of like, how do I want to route this through? And so I thought that the most chosen incorrect answer was probably going to be lettuce. And that's why I chose that to go to a different page, because I want to acknowledge that misconception. Okay. And then this one is just way off. Meat and cheese. I mean, for me, it is, because those are wetter elements than lettuce. And so I think that that one's way off. And so I put that on the like red route, as we saw on that last slide. And so I'm going to acknowledge that in the feedback I give on those slides and how I ask the next question. So on the next slide, so again, if they chose that correct answer, they're going to slide 3, to page 3. So we go to page 3, and you see that I give them that feedback. I reinforce what they just chose. I even gave them the little picture of the mayonnaise to say, yes, you're right. Condiments are the right thing, and act as a barrier. And then I asked them the next question. And so that's one way you can build it out. I could have gotten even more specific and maybe skipped over, again, how somebody said with the pre-assessment, I could have asked that at the beginning of the course and then just not given them the content on the condiments. There's a lot of ways to go with this. Okay. So let's see what happens if they got it what I thought was slightly incorrect, where maybe it would be a common misconception. So that one's go to page 4. So let's go to page 4. And you'll see that I acknowledged in the feedback what they chose. While lettuce can help with sogginess, condiments like mayonnaise, mustard, and butter act as a barrier. So I acknowledged their misconception, but then made sure that they knew what the right one was. And you can go even further with this. The sky's the limit, really, because the beauty of the Genially interactive element here is you can route them how you want. What you do with that routing is up to you. But I'm just here to show you that this is a valuable tool for you to use for your learners. Okay, and so then we go on to the next question, which ingredient is the structure of the sandwich and should go on the bottom. And if we went back to the info button, we would see that it's meat and cheese. Again, I told you I was putting the correct answer first here every time. Definitely wouldn't do that for the learner, but for our purposes, I do, just so that we can quickly identify that correct answer. Okay. And then we move through, and again, this is a prototype. I didn't build out the whole thing with all the questions, but this gives you a really good idea, I think, of how you can tailor this to your learner. And that's why it's called a dynamic assessment. The reason it's a dynamic assessment is because it is moving with the learner, responding to the learner in real time. Okay, we're not going to wait until they're done with the assessment to then assign them a new course or move on. This can all be done right within Genially. Okay. I think that's all I had to show you. Okay, so at the end here, this is another way you can use this. So I've done this in a mock course I did for a job interview where I built out like a personality assessment or a personality test type of interaction. And so this is how I relate that. Like the best result, maybe you're like, you got 90% correct, or you got 100% correct. And maybe your recommendation here, again, I left the Genially text in here, but you could even route them further from this slide. Maybe if they got the middle or the worst result, maybe you're routing them to retake the course, go to another course. Maybe they need to have a coaching conversation. Again, I know this is about sandwiches, but we're applying business principles here with our jobs. So this could come down to a coaching conversation because you just did not, like, you got them all wrong, right? That path you went on, we need to route you to actually talk to somebody, because that means, you either did not understand the content, maybe there was a language barrier, maybe there's a learning disability that has not been identified throughout the interview process, or maybe you just clicked through, right? There's quite a few possibilities for a learner, but we need to find out what that was. And just having them fail the assessment is not enough. What we can do here with Genially and our dynamic assessments is really find out and drill down to what is the problem. What is the problem? If most people are missing one question or most people are clicking on one certain answer choice, that might mean my content is confusing. I have to look at myself as the ID for that, right? If everybody's choosing it, that's not a them issue. That's a me issue, right? That's a design flaw. And so these are the types of things that it can point out for us, which is super valuable. So I don't know if there's any other questions, but
Feel free to ask all of your questions to Christy. Like, really, Christy, you need to share these links so people can start like making their own sandwiches.
yes. It was so much fun to make, though. I mean, I discovered a lot more that Genially could do than I even realized, honestly, because I was really loving figuring out how to, let's go back to this.
And I believe it's actually quite easy. I don't know how IDs like prepare to create this kind of assessments, but I believe that with Genially, it helps them maximize their time. You have your template. You can reuse your own template, add your bracket. Like I know that all of them like use a specific LMS because you can download your Genially in a SCORM format, but you have or see your own analytics or basic tracking on your own Genially. So to me, I believe that it is something that it add value to the work that you actually do. But this is the perfect example of all the things that you can achieve with a single objective.
Yeah. And I loved that when I was creating buttons or interactions, I could copy them to another page and not lose any of that functionality. It would copy that interactive element with it, which doesn't always happen with all the tools. Sometimes it'll just copy the actual graphic and won't copy all the triggers that you've given it. So I really appreciated that. And just the fact that I could upload any image I want, like these images all look like they came together, but they did not. I had to search for all of these. And so I thought that was really cool that I could make this look exactly the way I wanted to. And so it reminded me of a lot of way more expensive tools that allow you to do that same thing. And so I was really appreciative of that. But this has been really fun. And so I'm definitely going to try to build out the rest of it because I want to build out all the sandwich functionalities. So
I want to play with your Genially. Please send it to me.
I know.
You know that another like curious things that you do or with your Genially is add like a voiceover. So I have seen some Genially of some of our clients that they add some kind of voiceover or audio explaining any kind of a complex process. So they have told us that, yeah, I can explain process through images or through the interactive questions and add in my own audio voiceover.
Yeah, that's a great call out too, because for accessibility, this would be a lot easier to use if I had that audio option, making sure that someone who, or as you saw, when I copied them over, they weren't the most accessible text colors. And so that would have mitigated that risk as well to make sure that, they could access my text.
Well, we have another webinar to plan.
I know, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if some people have any answer, any question to ask Christy. Feel free to ask anything about this Genially or about how to create dynamic assessments. If not, you can watch this video or this session again. It's going to be on LinkedIn as well with the other sessions that we have had during the week. And well, thank you very much, Christy. It has been a pleasure to have
Thanks.
you here.
I'll share out
Um,
the templates I made on LinkedIn. I'm if when the recording is released, I can link it there as well. So just let me know, Christy, and I'll include it there. But this has just been super fun. And I think I really hope that this inspires people to really look at the capabilities of Genially. I know sometimes it can just be seen as this fun tool, and it is super fun, but you can do some real actual stuff here that you can track your learners, track your data, and make sure that you are building stuff that matters.
yeah, that's true. So before finishing, we want to remind you that in the course of next week, we will raffle a Genially master plan to all the people to register to this specific session and to all the sessions of Genially Talks, which includes all the premium feature of our tool. You can save your creation with password, download them in PDF, JPG, video, HTML, and more. Also download in SCORM files. We also remind you that our Genially Corporate Ambassador Program is now open so that you may become a part of a great community and revolutionary training content together. Christy, one of our fabulous corporate Genially ambassadors. So thank you very much for this amazing session. It is like a really hot topic, and a lot of people have asked how they can start creating or building this kind of dynamic assessment, and you are the perfect teacher and the perfect person to explain this very easily. So I totally understand. I want to create one right now.
I know I want to do more now. I'm definitely going to be finding out what else I can build. So I'll share them as they come to me.
Yeah, you can create some of them that can be reusable, so people can start reusing your templates or finding in the inspiration side and Genially.
Yeah, I love that.
Great. Well, thank you very much. We have another session, another amazing session tomorrow with Cynthia Berry, and during the week we have more sessions as well. So feel free to go to Genially to see the Genially talks and all the sessions that we have available for you. Thank you very much, Christy, and see you next time. We have a lot of webinars to plan in the next near
Thank you.
future. Bye bye.